Good morning, students. The dramatic monologue continued. Our poet today is Robert Browning. His poem, My Last Duchess. If we look at the poem, the form of the poem, we will find that Robert Browning uses continuous verse. The poem is not divided into stanzas. He is also using the open heroic couplet. Today we're going to find out what is meant by open heroic couplet and closed heroic couplet as we go on. Let's move on to the poem. The two pictures before us, the first one on your left is the last Duchess, the portrait of the last Duchess, and the second portrait on your right is her husband, the Duke. The story is taken from a real historical story during the Italian Renaissance in the 14th century. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder. Now, Fra Pandolf's hands work busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance. The depth and passion of its earnest glance, but to myself they turned. What do you notice about the couplet at the end? Do you hear it? Where are the stops? Where are the caesuras? The poet here uses run-on lines, uses enjambment, so that you cannot hear the two words that rhyme together as they rhyme. Look at the first two lines, for example. The words that rhyme here are wall and call. But see where the stop is. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. Where is the stop? After the word alive. I call that piece a wonder. The next stop is after wonder. He doesn't stop after I call, so that we hear wall and call, hands and stands, said and read, countenance, glance, etc. Okay? He uses run-on lines, he uses stops within the lines, and therefore we don't hear the rhyming that takes place. This is called open heroic couplets. Stopped heroic couplets, usually the poet like Alexander Pope or John Dryden in the classic period, they used closed heroic couplets, which means that they used two lines that gave a full, complete sentence or meaning, and they rhymed together, and there was a stop at the end of the second line. You can hear the rhyming words being pronounced. So that's the basic difference. But why does Browning use the open heroic couplet? Because it makes his language much closer to conversational language, everyday language that we use. Okay? So, That's my last Duchess painted on the wall. He's pointing. He's pointing to something. It's a portrait on a wall, and it's the portrait of his last Duchess, his wife, the Duchess, his wife, that no longer exists. Where has she gone? We don't know. And it seems that he is speaking or addressing somebody that we don't know at the moment, and who hasn't opened his mouth. He's very silent. He's a silent listener. This is what a dramatic monologue is about. He continues saying, the speaker here is the Duke. He is not the poet. He is the character that Robert Browning created in the poem, taken from a real story in the history, in Italian history, Italian Renaissance. Okay? Looking as if she were alive. The portrait portrays just an image of his wife, and yet that image is so perfect that she looks as if she's alive. I call that piece a wonder. That piece is speaking about the portrait. It seems he likes gathering arts and paintings and statues, etc. So, in his opinion, this is a very important, expensive piece. It's a wonder. It's a piece that is valuable, very valuable. Not because it's the picture of his wife, no, because the painter who painted it made his wife look as if she was alive. Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day. Who is Fra Pandolf? He is the artist. How long did he work? How long did it take him to paint the portrait? A busy day, just one day. So the painter painted this wonderful painting in one day. Why? Why was he in a hurry? Why did he finish it in a day? Why not 2 days, 3 days, etc.? This is what we're going to find out later on. Will it please you sit and look at her? He's speaking. He's definitely speaking to somebody. He is asking that person to get comfortable. Sit down and look at the portrait. Admire the portrait better. But he didn't say the portrait. He said, at her. So who is this person who is allowed to admire the portrait of his dead wife? We will find out in a few lines. I said Fra Pandolf by design. He repeats his words and tells the silent listener that the portrait was painted by Fra Pandolf. For never read strangers like you. What do we learn from this sentence? This is our role as readers. Every sentence, every word, we try to interpret it and understand this person and discover this person who is speaking to us. What kind of person is he? And as he speaks, he's also reflecting upon the other characters in the poem. So, from this sentence, we understand that the person is not family, is not someone close to the Duke, no. He's a stranger, and he is not the first stranger to sit there in that very same place and look and admire the portrait. So now we understand that the silent listener is a stranger. They all asked the same question. What was that question? Why did she have so much passion in her face? Why was she blushing? Why were her eyes so deep and so thoughtful and so expressive, earnest glance? Why did she look so earnest, so good, so beautiful? But to myself they turned. They asked me that question, all of them. All of the strangers before you asked me the very same question you have asked me. I will answer you, okay? Since not by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me if they durst, how such a glance came there. So not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps the Duke here tells us that the portrait is hidden behind a curtain, and no one is allowed to open that curtain except himself. So the strangers could only ask him for information. That is, if they durst. The word durst here means, it's Old English for dared. If they dared to ask me. The Duke knows that he is not an easy person to talk to. He is a tough person, and they are afraid to speak to him, to ask him questions about his dead wife. So if they durst, how such a glance came there? They want to know the cause behind the way she looks. What caused that look? He will try to give them an answer. And as he gives his answer, we begin to uncover, we begin to reveal what is actually going on in this man's mind. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. I'm not going to lie about it. No, her blushing is not because I was standing before her. I, her husband, was standing before her. No, there are other reasons, and he is going to guess. He's not sure, but he is just guessing. But this shows what went or what goes on in his mind. Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much. Or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. We mustn't, compare what is going on here in the poem to our own culture. No, they have their own culture, and we have to, abide by it. We have to take it as it is. And remember, this is 14th century Italian Renaissance. At that time, it was a courtesy for a man when he saw a woman to be polite by saying something nice to her, by giving her a flower. This was something normal. Complimenting a woman before you was something considered a gentlemanly politeness, etc. So the Duke here imagines that she is blushing because Fra Pandolf, the painter, told her that her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, that her sleeves, mantle here means the sleeves, the long sleeves of her dress, are hiding her beautiful hands. Or perhaps Fra Pandolf told her, paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. This is a metaphor. Paint must never hope. Paint must never hope that it will be able to reproduce the same colors on her face. Paint doesn't have that power. The colors on her face are lively, are stronger than the paint itself. So paint here is personified. It mustn't obtain hope. So, in his opinion, in the Duke's opinion, these compliments made by which he imagines that Fra Pandolf said to his wife, he believes that they are complete nonsense. They have no value. But in her opinion, and we understand this from his words himself, she considered this courtesy. She considered it politeness. So their views are different. And that's what he believed happened when she blushed and her face smiled and she reddened. She had a heart. Is her heart seen in the portrait? No. The Duke here is going beyond the portrait. He's going to touch on certain behavior that cannot be seen in the portrait. She has a heart, how shall I say, very difficult, to try and explain her heart, how she behaved. Too soon made glad. Perhaps the only definition or the only description that suits her heart is that she is too soon made glad. She's so simple that she is made glad. The speaker here, the Duke, he is revealing his wife as well as revealing his mind and his reactions. She is simple, she's polite, she's beautiful, she's young, he's arrogant, he is proud, and he is rough, and we will learn more. Too soon made glad. too easily impressed. Anything impresses her. But as a duchess, she shouldn't act that way. That's what is going on in his mind. She shouldn't be easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on. There was nothing that went by her or that she saw that wasn't admired by her. And her looks went everywhere. She looked at everything. She didn't miss anything. Everything, small or big, impressed her. Sir, he is addressing the silent listener, the stranger. He is addressing him as a sir. So we begin to imagine that this silent listener is someone important. 'Twas all one. She didn't differ. Everything was the same to her. And then he begins to give us examples to try and enforce the meaning that he is trying to convey to the silent listener. My favor at her breast. I once gave her a very expensive necklace. It impressed her, and I was glad. Then, at the very next moment, she saw the dropping of the daylight in the west. She saw the sunset. She smiled and she was glad and she was impressed. Just as impressed as she was with my necklace. The bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her. When she walked in the garden of fruits, the orchard, and she met anybody in the garden, and he is described here as officious. This is the Duke's opinion about him. He describes him as being officious, as being a fool or something not nice anyway. Being polite meant that he should give her a bough of cherries that he breaks from the garden. This impressed her and made her glad, just as glad as when she received from him the necklace, just as glad as when she saw the sun setting, just as glad as even the white mule that she rode round the terrace. All and each would draw from her alike the approving speech. She reacted to all these examples that he gave to the silent listener in the very same manner. She was impressed and she became joyful and her cheeks reddened. A new point. She thanked men. It seems here that the Duke is bothered by a lot of things the Duchess was doing. She thanked men. Again, this is not seen, actually a visual sight in the portrait. This is out of his head. He's letting out things inside him. She thanked men. Good, good. It's not bad. But thank, and here we have examples, pictures of my favor at her breast in the first portrait on your left, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the sun setting in the second picture, the white mule and the orchard on your right. The orchard is a place, a closed garden which has fruit. So she thanked men, somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. She would treat other men as equal with me. I am the one who gave her the title Duchess. I have been a duke for years. Our family name is 900 years old. I am the one who gave her the title Duchess. And yet she thanked others as she would thank me. This man is an angry man. So I gave her the title as a gift, and this is what I got in return. I obtained this behavior. What can I do? Who'd stoop to playing this sort of trifling? She was childish, and I didn't have the time to stoop, to, bend and make my mind equal to hers. And even if I had the talent to tell her that she was doing wrong things, which, and he confirms here that he didn't have that talent, which I don't have. If I could have told her that she disgusts me, her behavior disgusts me, that she is misbehaving, that she has exceeded the right things that should be done, I don't have that ability, that power. I am not skilled in telling others what they should do. No, I have another way of solving this problem, which we will find out in a few minutes. And even if she let me, even if she listened to me, I don't think I would give her the chance to answer me and reply to me. No, this I definitely won't allow. Even then would be soon some stooping. I never belittle myself. And I choose never to stoop, and I never belittle myself. We will understand that he was belittling himself before the silent listener. Oh, sir, Robert Browning here is being ironic. Again, before, oh, sir, he says, I never stoop. And then, oh, sir, he is speaking to the silent speaker as if he is someone very important. She smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her. I am not denying that when I passed by her, she smiled at me. Okay. This grew. What grew? Her smiles? Or his anger. We can here sense that his anger was growing and growing and growing. I gave commands, and because he has no skill to tell her that her behavior, that he dislikes her behavior, what did he do? He gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together. Then she stopped smiling completely. Why? Robert Browning is being ironic here. There she stands. There she is, standing before us. A portrait, a live portrait, as if alive. What did the Duke do to her? Well, you have to guess, but what he implied is quite apparent, had some influence on the silent listener, who seems to have, jumped out of his chair and made some kind of action or movement to indicate that he wanted to go downstairs again. Will it please you rise? The Duke tells him. Oh, will it please you rise? Do you want to rise? Okay, we'll meet the company below. Come on, let's go downstairs and meet the rest of the people downstairs. Then I repeat, she's going to repeat why he was telling him all this, and who is this silent listener. The Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed. I remind you, I repeat, that your master, the Count, must not forget to pay me the dowry that I deserve. I want you to help me obtain as much as I can. Oh, although I confirm, or I make it definitely known, that I really do want to marry his daughter. So, okay, so this is what I want from you to do. So the silent listener is an emissary or a servant working for a count. The whole issue was about that the Duke was getting ready to get married again. He wanted to marry the Count's daughter, but before marrying her, he wanted to make sure that he would be paid enough money. He would obtain a good dowry from the Count. So the father of the bride is the one that gave the groom a dowry. Nay, we'll go together down. That's enough about this topic. And he still calls him by the title Sir. Sir, notice Neptune. Neptune is the sea god. Though taming a sea horse, he looks like he is taming a seahorse. This is an image of the Duke trying to tame the Duchess. A metaphor. Thought a rarity. This statue is very valuable, just like the portrait was a wonder. This is a rare piece that I own. And the artist here was called Claus of Innsbruck, and it was made in bronze and made especially for me. This man is arrogant, he is proud, he is a murderer, he is wicked, he has a lot of, bad feelings inside him, and his wife is something simple, something delicate, sweet, kind, easily impressed, etc. This is the statue on his staircase as they went downstairs. Notice the seahorse. The seahorse looks more like the second picture. In the second picture, that's a real seahorse. The other one is, a real horse with a body of a fish at the end. But there is something called a seahorse, like the second picture on your right. And this is Neptune. He is the sea god, taming the seahorse. The Victorian period saw both the invention and the high point of the dramatic monologue in English poetry. The dramatic monologues of Browning are characterized by certain identifiable traits. First, the reader takes the part of the analyzer, who step by step reveals the main character's real personality, and the listeners as well. Second, the speaker uses a case-making argumentative tone. Third, the reader completes the dramatic scene from within. We have a lot to do as readers in this poem. We have to understand. And from here, the development of the poem takes place. It's not in the action, it's in our minds. We begin to understand. With every sentence, something is added, something new is added. By means of inference and imagination. The dramatic monologue allows authors to cross boundaries which were once impossible to them because their poems were subjective and concentrated on their own private views. When a person keeps on concentrating on his own private views, then he begins to lack originality, or he begins to want new topics which he can't find. The speaker of My Last Duchess is a fictional personage based probably on Alfonso II, 1533-1598, the 5th Duke of Ferrara during the Italian Renaissance. He was thrice married in his lifetime, the first time to Lucrezia, the daughter of the Duke of Florence. Only 14 when she married Ferrara, she was found dead at 17 by poisoning. Browning's dramatic poems delve into the twisted psyche of men who felt love's passion too hard. The poems act to connect the reader with the speaker and make the reader become co-conspirators in their actions. An imaginary situation is evoked in a realistic historical situation. The readers are able to infer the motives for these acts by looking beyond the subjectivity of the justification. However, readers do not seem ever to sympathize with the speakers in works such as My Last Duchess. As the poem opens, the Duke has just completed the formalities of negotiating with the emissary of the Count of Tyrol for the hand of the Count's niece. This emissary then serves as the immediate audience for the speaker of the poem. The two men have evidently been discussing the financial terms of the forthcoming marriage. They have passed in front of a portrait of the Duke's first wife, a portrait which hangs near the top of a splendid staircase within the Duke's palace. In front of the picture, there is a bench or a chair on which the two men sit before they finally, at the poem's end, descend to meet the company below. My Last Duchess is a character study, and the theme of the poem is closely involved with the way the Duke reveals his true self and that of his first wife to the emissary. To make the discussion of theme convenient, we can think of the poem's structure as being roughly divided into three parts. In the first, the Duke uncovers his late wife's portrait to his visitor, explaining as he does so that the artist was Frau Pandolf. In response to a question, the Duke rather calmly and objectively comments on the depth and passions of his wife's earnest glance. The Duke in the second section bears his resentment that others besides himself could bring that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. At this point, the poem becomes a study of the Duke's pride, and we watch with fascinated horror as his jealousy finally drives him to bring about her death. Who passed without much the same smile? This grew. What grew? His anger, his jealousy. I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together. Then she stopped smiling forever. The Duke uses diplomatic language as he talks of his intended bride and her dowry. The last 3.5 lines provide a revealing final glimpse of the Duke's character. The emissary, out of respect for the Duke's superior rank, has evidently made some gesture inviting the Duke to descend the staircase before him. He also takes this opportunity to change the subject abruptly, indicating to the emissary that he wishes to carry the discussion of marriage arrangements no further. Hence, his invitation that the emissary notice the bronze statue of Neptune, the sea god, taming a seahorse. My Last Duchess tells us of an enormously proud man, capable of great self-deception, capable in fact of murder. Yet he has considerable diplomatic skill and a highly developed appreciation of art. The Duke is a consummate hypocrite and courtly liar. Although the poem is built around the portrait of his wife, it is really a superbly and realistically drawn character sketch of the Duke himself. My Last Duchess is a study of heartless murder, passionless pride, and hypocritical self-deception. The poem is a dramatic monologue. Its verse form is the rhymed couplet, the open rhymed couplet, and the line length is the pentameter. The poetic foot basically employed is the iamb, unstressed, stressed. The poet uses the open heroic couplet, which means that the couplet does not give a complete closed sentence with every two lines, like the closed heroic couplet. The poem makes such extensive use of enjambment or run-on lines that persons who hear the poem read aloud are often unaware that rhymed couplets are employed in it. These elements together impart a casual, conversational tone to a poem that is written in a very rigid or strict artificial form, the couplet. Next will be T.S. Eliot, part of his poem, The Love Song of Alfred Prufrock. The end. Thank you.